Welcome to our executive interview series at AI Talks, presented by AI Scoop. I'm Wyatt Cash, and we're here with Ben Paris, Vice President, Government Solutions for Seekr. Ben, thank you for joining us.
Nice to be here this morning.
So one of the questions I'd like to get your perspective on is, what would you say have been the hardest barriers to AI adoption inside government, and how are some of these organizations overcoming them?
Great question. So we've recognized that adoption's a real challenge inside government, primarily because they simply aren't trusting the outputs of models. It's not about which AI model do I use. We recognize that Gen AI and CDAO has supplied lots of different models through GenAI.mil. The challenge is that the users simply don't trust the responses that they're getting. They recognize that all of the data that underlies those models is public and open. It hasn't been fine-tuned or trained for their purposes. And so as a result, they wind up seeing hallucinations. They see these models go off the guardrails. And once that happens, you lose faith. And when you lose faith, you can't gain that back.
And do you have a sense of how the military or agencies in general are trying to close that gap?
They're trying by essentially using other techniques such as retrieval augmented generation to pull content from their data stores. That's an expensive process. It's heavily compute intensive, and what we've seen is that the ability to scale that process is really challenging, especially when you have contract officers that don't want to ensure that they overrun the budget on AI availability.
Absolutely. And then, so looking ahead, what will distinguish government organizations successfully operationalize AI, let's say over the next 2 years, compared to some of those at risk of maybe falling behind?
Yeah, I think the biggest three factors that are required are, as I mentioned, the trust, their ability to do it quickly, speed, and then adoption and scale. So first of all, we have to overcome the trust barriers, figure out how to retrain models, and that's something that Seekr is really putting a flag in the sand on doing, is retraining models, building out trustworthy AI that explains how it gets to explains the reasoning behind the models and the outputs, and how we got to that answer so that users can build that trust over time. On speed, there is a need to quickly scale or quickly develop applications and fine-tune models that are fit for purpose. And so what used to take months, we can start building in weeks. And then lastly, on adoption and scale, the ability to quickly broaden the user base. Once you've built trust and you can do it quickly, how do you scale those applications across a user base? How do you scale your infrastructure to support that without overrunning budgets, with understanding that you can continue the process of expansion of what AI is able to offer.
Finally, I'm curious, there's a lot of concern about the cost and volume of tokens that are used in AI computing. How are organizations like yours helping your customers really come to terms with how that's exploding?
Yeah, so it's a simple math equation, and what we're seeing in the space, particularly where Seekr is really involved, is that more folks are moving away from the cloud. They're simply wanting to own their own AI, and the way they do that is by purchasing appliances that they can stand up in their own data centers or at the edge, where they control their ability through GPU clusters that are included in that appliance. So you get an AI in a box, which is something that Seekr's really quite forward on allowing folks to connect to an isolated instance or a very specific appliance where they actually own their own intelligence. And so that's an AI space that I think is really starting to resonate with cloud costs skyrocketing. Folks are recognizing that at $20 or $30 or $40,000 a month for a GPU infrastructure, an appliance quickly pays for itself, even if it's a several $100,000 box.
Appreciate that. Well, Ben Paris, thank you so much for joining us here at AI Talks.
Thank you.